Hello and welcome to Bridgecast. We're here with Dr. Kate Parsons and we're super excited that she's here with us. We are doing a raffle this week. But before we do that and before we announce what the raffle is, we want to give a little bit of time for people to get on and sort of join us in this live stream. One of the things that I want to encourage you all to do is make sure that you can leave comments if you want to. We've been having sort of an absence of comments, lately. So if that's something you all want to do, engage with each other, engage with us, that's a good way to keep the two-way communication going. One of the things I've been seeing struggling with nonprofits and other organizations with COVID-19 changes happening is that two-way communication, and it's very important for institutions and for organizations to have connection and communication with the people that they are working with. And so please leave comments, please engage with each other, with us, and we'll do our best to respond once we get back around to it. Joe, do you want to tell them a little bit about what we're raffling off this week?
Yes, absolutely. So again, we're doing the every other week thing, so we don't get too bogged down in raffles and so we can focus on the wonderful guests that we have on Bridgecast. So this week, I'm very excited. We have a few more art pieces from Dupree, but we're gonna break in between those. We have a gift certificate we're raffling off this week for all of you plant lovers, us included. It's a $25 gift certificate to Rolling Ridge Nursery in Webster Groves. And we're very excited. It's a wonderful nursery if you haven't been there. It's expansive. They have so many plants, as many plants as you could possibly want, and more. So yeah, $25 to support a localized business in Webster Groves. Plants are healing during this time. That's something you can engage with, touch some soil, get some soil in your hands, and make your home or wherever look beautiful in the process. So $25 to get your garden started or continue your garden from Rolling Ridge, and it's all around. So.
I want to reiterate that the raffle tickets are $5. So the gift certificate will be $25 worth, but $5 per raffle ticket, and that money will go directly to support our 2021 St. Louis Dupree-Exchange program. We're doing our best to keep up with programming and with fundraising to make sure that we offer our exchange programs to little to no cost for our exchange program members from St. Louis and from Dupree. So that money goes directly to support that program.
Yeah, so $5 to support our organization and the wonderful individuals, young adults that go in the exchange program. And you can possibly win some free plants.
Okay, yeah. Let's go into our conversation. Kate, I'm super happy you're here with us. Can you just give us a quick intro about your work with Webster University and who you are?
Sure. Thanks for having me. I'm Kate Parsons, and I'm a professor at Webster. I teach in the philosophy department. I'm housed primarily there, although I teach in a number of interdisciplinary programs. My concentration in philosophy is in ethics, so I teach courses in environmental ethics, bioethics, global ethics, contemporary moral problems. Several of those overlap with the program in international human rights and also the program in sustainability studies. And then I'm also the director of the Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies program and teach a number of courses in that program as well, including feminist philosophy and feminist and gender theory.
Wonderful. That's amazing. Thank you so much. Can you give us, again, a brief overview of your involvement with Bridge Builders then?
Sure. So I had the privilege of going with the team in the summer of 2019 and spent most of the week in Dupree and then back in St. Louis. Was able to join the group for a number of discussions and outings and projects. My role during those 2 weeks was to help get the participants, myself included, thinking about a number of different concepts and ideas. So thinking about forms of privilege, about the notion of oppression, what that means, responsibility, and colonization, particularly in terms of this program. And then to be thinking through a number of isms, so white racism, ethnocentrism, sexism, and the like. So thinking through how those different isms come up in an exchange program like this. I helped to facilitate some discussions in response to a couple of films. So we watched Awake, which covers the protests at Standing Rock, which were not far from Dupree, and the film Whose Streets, which covers protests in Ferguson in response to the killing of Michael Brown. So those were a few of the things that I did with the group.
And we were so happy to have you on the exchange program. I think those two films, to briefly touch on that, Kate, were a huge impact on me and somebody who was helping facilitate that group, and I know it was for our members as well. One of the connections I have had in your classes, both with Bridge Builders and then work overall, is this idea of care ethics. You identified at the beginning of the live stream as an emphasis, and that's something where I would like to see my emphasis go in my education as well. And so, can you describe to us the complexities of care ethics and like sort of the general overview of it as well?
Yeah, I could try in a nutshell. So care ethics is a theory that's developed in a number of disciplines, philosophy, psychology, and education primarily, but its scope continues to widen. It helps us think through some slightly different ways about our responsibilities, particularly different from some dominant Western ethical theories that probably more people are familiar with. In contrast with dominant theories that tend to think through our duties, so our duties that would apply to all, that would be universalizable. Care ethics thinks about responsibilities more in terms of responsiveness. So if you think about that kind of contrast, thinking less about our duties to all and more about responsiveness to particular others based on what their needs are, especially their self-professed needs and their situation. So it tends to pay much more attention to the particulars, not that dominant theories don't do that as well, but really thinks about it in terms of how best do I respond. And it tends to also try to break down some fairly well-entrenched dualisms in the Western tradition, so ways of thinking about concepts as almost as opposites. So thinking about rational over emotional responses. Typically we privilege the rational, but care ethics doesn't always, right? It puts some stock in the emotional responses that we have as well. Typically we tend to privilege public life over private life, but care ethics also attends to that dualism. And then also men's labor has been privileged more in the Western tradition than women's. So care ethics takes a kind of critical look at all of those kinds of things. Why have we seen those as very different? And it pays attention to the social statuses and hierarchies that come out of that. So examines who has had a more centralized voice in discussions about what's right or what's just or what's good. And the theory attempts to give some space or some time to those voices that might have been unheard or undervalued by the centering of those dominant groups in power. So it tends to prompt us less to ask what's the right thing to do generally, and more to ask how can I respond in a caring way to this particular situation.
And I think that is incredibly valuable, and thank you for sharing that, Kate. It's something that I struggle to go with, but you teaching me that, it's incredibly helpful. I think we all agree, Joe and I agree, and one of the things that I think is important to implement within our exchange programs is this idea of care ethics. Where do you think care ethics can be valuable to change-based organizations, nonprofits, social change organizations, community organizers? Where do you think this can be valuable to us?
Yeah, so in a number of ways, I think it can be really valuable to a change-based organization. When you're, especially one like this, because when you're immersing yourself in a culture that's different from yours, which all participants are, whether they're from St. Louis or Dupree, it's always really important to be wary, I think, of a one-size-fits-all kind of approach, right? To assume that that the right thing to do is the same in one culture, or to assume that it's the same thing in all cultures, when it might be very different based on cultural norms. And in addition, and this is part of, I think, where care ethics becomes particularly important, is it helps with that wariness of sort of the dominant narratives about what the right thing is, or what's to be valued. Because again, those dominant narratives can sometimes gloss over the experiences of marginalized groups. And so the care ethics kind of framework prompts you to ask, whose voice am I not hearing, or whose experiences are not necessarily being centered, and how can I find a way to give space to those who might not necessarily be the ones who are articulating where they're coming from and what they're going through. So it's a way of getting us to think about sort of where we sit metaphorically, right? Where we sit in terms of our social status and power, and to think about the ways in which that's often based in things like race and ethnicity and religion and nationality and all of those kinds of things, right? So if we're being prompted to think through those kinds of things, I think it can be really important for change. Care ethics, as we talked about in a couple of the sessions last summer, helps you check your privilege in some ways if you're part of one of those dominant groups, right? Helps you think through how do I be aware of where I sit if I am a centered voice, and it also can help us avoid wherever we're coming from a kind of us versus them construction, even if it's a really well-meaning one, right? So even if it's bearing no ill will, and even if it comes from the best of intentions, sometimes that kind of othering with a capital O that comes from having your experiences or your voices being most centered can still be problematic, right? So us versus them thinking can translate into colonial patterns, right? Of we need to help those people, right? With the emphasis on the difference between we and them, or I'm afraid, or I don't want to talk to those people, if it's based on a history of exclusion and violence, right? So all of those kinds of things can be not necessarily overcome, but at least something that you can be aware of in terms of that framework, which I think is really important for enhancing intercultural communication, which is a big goal of Bridge Builders STL. So that was a long answer to your question, sorry.
It was a fantastic answer.
And I don't think that answer will ever stop developing and changing and expanding. Absolutely. Along with that, so this idea of care ethics and place-based thinking and learning, can you talk to us? You're fairly involved in your own aspect in the study abroad programs at Webster, and you've developed some things. Can you just overview the wonderful, wonderful things that you're doing in study abroad that kind of tie into everything that we've talked about thus far?
Sure. So I've been doing a couple of different things that might be relevant. One is, as you know, I've been working with my colleague in sociology, Danielle McCartney, and together we've developed a couple of programs based primarily on environmental justice considerations, one to Thailand and one to Costa Rica. So I've been focusing a little bit on programs like that. But I've also this year been working on, I had the privilege of getting a faculty fellowship this year to focus on underrepresented students and faculty-led short-term programs. And the reason that I've really been wanting to think this through is to try to make study abroad and global learning generally more accessible. So study abroad, I think, the traditional model of at least a semester, if not a year away, tends to cater to the most privileged, right? So it tends to cater to the 18 to 22-year-old bracket, primarily white students, and primarily those of financial means, who have, the typical profile is somebody who has vacationed abroad with their family before, and so wants a sort of deeper dive into academic learning. All of which is fantastic. I strongly encourage anybody who can do that to do it, but it doesn't capture all students for sure, and it's not possible for a lot of people, right, who have significant responsibilities in terms of, for instance, caregiving, back to care ethics, right? But those who are responsible for children or siblings or elder members of their family, it's not possible to take off for a semester, let alone a year. Those whose families or even just themselves depend on their income from a job. Most jobs are not going to let you take off for a full semester, right, and have it waiting for you when you come back. So that's a significant privilege too, right, to be able to leave your job for more than a couple of weeks. So with all of those kinds of things in mind, I've been really trying to think about study abroad and global learning in some more accessible ways by trying to develop programs that are shorter. And also that are faculty-led to provide that kind of support for instance, for a first-generation student who is having some trouble, understandably, navigating an academic system, right? Or for somebody who would just feel much more comfortable having somebody who's been there before lead them through the process. So I've been trying to think through ways to design programs that, and Danielle McCartney and I both have been doing this through these programs, trying to design programs that are more accessible for a wider range of people. And so in the process of this, by thinking through the work for this fellowship, I've been thinking about Bridge Builders STL too, right? I'm thinking about the Dupree-St. exchange as really a kind of study abroad program, right? That we wouldn't typically call it that because of the abroad part. But when you think about the goals of study abroad, they are typically to engage in cultural immersion and to do some global learning, right? Which is very much a big part of what happens on this trip. In this trip, you have people from different cultural backgrounds, right? Engaging in this kind of exchange, and not even necessarily just from different cultural backgrounds, but on some framings of this from different nations, right? That this is the program can be conceived in that way. So the more I thought about it, the more I thought that this really is an expanded and exciting way of thinking about what study abroad is in terms of the larger goal of global learning. This program has the advantage of bringing together folks who would not typically have the opportunity to learn from one another, and does that really well without all of the difficulties of securing passports and visas and alternate ways to communicate via phone, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it really has a lot of advantages in terms of the wider goal of global learning.
Thank you very much for that. And I'm going to ask a follow-up, and I know we didn't, but I hope that this is okay. In engaging, and I know Joe and I were able to engage with your study abroad programs in Costa Rica, and that was a hugely beneficial time for both of us. And for any Webster University students over there, a quick plug for Kate's study abroad programs, both to Thailand and to Costa Rica, which I believe Costa Rica is happening possibly this fall break, correct? Hopefully,
yes.
If you... The deadline is June 1st, so it's been extended. So if anybody is interested, there's still time actually to apply for that program by the 1st. So
I very much recommend that you guys do so. It was very beneficial for us, and we learned so much while on that program. And it's only a week, which is something that I am thankful for, and I know others are thankful for, because that was the only way I was going to be able to study abroad. So.
1 week over fall break, you are not doing school, so if you're able to take a week off of work, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kate, I've heard this a few times that it's one of the most financially what's the word I'm looking for? Accessible, thank you, programs that Webster offers.
Yes.
Correct?
True.
So yes, and there's still scholarships, you still have that one free flight program at Webster,
yeah.
So all that good stuff. Coffee will never be the same for you. Yes, which is a blessing and a privilege.
Yes. Kate, is there something in specific you would like to speak over, or anything that you'd like to share with our people on the live stream while you have the chance?
In addition to everything I've said, not necessarily, just that I really do, for anybody who has not had the opportunity to engage in the program yet, or who thinks it's great but might not be able to participate themselves, I really would encourage people to get involved. I think it's a fantastic opportunity, whether you're doing so to sponsor somebody to go on the program, or whether it's through forging additional community partnerships, which I think can always be really beneficial to both ends of the experience. I highly recommend it. It was a great experience.
And I'm so thankful that you were able to go with us. And we were not able to share this at the beginning, but Kate is actually one of the main reasons Bridge Builders is a possibility and is a reality as it is, from the many hours we have spent toiling over wordsmithing and over philosophy and making sure that the ethics of the organization are as grounded as we can be. And we could not have done that without your help, Kate. So thank you.
And all the skin that you have in the game, truly. You were a backbone of this past year's exchange program, and for that we are forever grateful.
Yes. Well,
likewise, it's been a privilege. And that continues.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us again. I think this is a great reminder for myself on how important care ethics is, and how important it is overall to have conversation around ethics. And that was one of the things that we were hoping to achieve with Bridgecast, was to talk more about these very important issues and engage more with our community. So we hope you guys continue to stay engaged, and we'll be in touch soon.
Yeah.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Bye.